Welcome to number 7, Place de Fontenoy, the Paris home of UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, celebrating its 70th birthday this year. Be sure to put a candle on the cake. Today, UNESCO is looking back in order to have a sharper image of what lies ahead in scientific research. And when I say back, I mean way back, like 1,000 years ago, to a time that is often described as the Islamic Golden Age, a time of remarkable achievement across a variety of concentrations, from philosophy to medicine to scientific research. In particular, we're going to focus our attention on one man, Ibn Al-Haytham. As part of the International Year of Light, scholars, scientists, educators, and historians, among others, are coming from around the world to UNESCO, and we are very lucky to have a few of them with us today to talk about this conference on the Islamic Golden Age of Light, science, for today's knowledge-based society. Joining me in the studio are Professor Rashdi Rached, Emeritus Director of France's Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique in Paris, and the former Director of the Center for History of Medieval and Arabic Sciences and Philosophy at Paris 7, the Denis Diderot University. He is an honorary professor at the University of Tokyo and emeritus professor at the University of Montserrat. Welcome, Professor. Gihan Kalmel is an infrared microspectroscopy beamline scientist at Sesame, which stands for Synchrotron Light for Experimental Science and Applications in the Middle East. She's also a professor on leave from the physics department in the Faculty of Science at Helwan University in Egypt, where she has also been a lecturer. John Dudley is a professor of physics working at France's Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique in Besançon, France. His research covers broad areas of optical science, and he's been working with the scientific community and with UNESCO on the International Year of Light since 2011. And you also serve as a chair of our International Steering Committee. And finally, with us is Vasudevan Lakshminarayanan. With degrees in physics and optics, he is professor at the University of Waterloo in Canada and the University of Michigan in the United States at Ann Arbor. He's one of the founding members of the ALOP project, which is Active Learning in Optics and Photonics. And that is also another one of our UNESCO projects, if I'm not mistaken. You're a member of the steering committee as well for the International Year of Light. Let me say welcome to all of you and to thank you for taking time today to talk about Ibn Al-Haytham, but also to cast him in a light that is relevant for our lives today. Professor Rached?
Yes.
Why should we care about Ibn Al-Haytham?
Why? Yes. It is a very long history. I mean, there is personal things, but there are more than personal affairs in this matter. In fact, if you are interested in history of mathematics mainly, and then the application of mathematics in other sciences, you cannot avoid the work of Ibn Al-Haytham, either in Arabic or in Latin, because you cannot understand what happened later on. For instance, if you read Descartes, or if you read, before Descartes, if you read Kepler, or read Descartes and others, and Huygens in this period, you cannot understand what they are doing, either in mathematics or in optics, without knowing what Ibn Al-Haytham did. And in fact, I began in the inverse way. I began by mathematics, very recent times, and then in the 17th century. And at this moment, through the Latin, I came back to Ibn al-Haytham to understand what was happening later on what they call early modern science. And then the development of this early modern science. Then, as you see, there are personal, I mean, affair in the sense that my own research from one side. Once you are working on Ibn al-Haytham, you will understand many other things happening today. Then you will ask the same question: why this man who worked in Cairo in the beginning of the 11th century at this level of science that you need some centuries later on to understand and to assimilate this science, and the difference between what was happening at that time and what is happening today in the same countries and in the same civilization. That's what I am interested in Ibn al-Haytham works, mainly in mathematics, in astronomy, and in optics.
So basically, unless we have this as a basis, it contextualizes our work today.
Yes, in a way. I mean, in a comparative way, that is from one side, and also as such. I mean, to understand how the invention of the new disciplines and new theories had been done, and how to build a new scientific generation in this kind of countries.
Professor Kamal, is that what we see happening at Sesame? That we have the science of Ibn al-Haytham taking shape within that project, which you're a part of in Jordan?
Yeah, exactly.
And
Actually, it's the foundation of the Sesame as a synchrotron, because synchrotron radiation facility is simply like a circle, but inside that circle there are lots of complexations. There are lots of optics, mechanics, geometry, electricity, engineering. So the optical systems are the basics of any synchrotron radiation facility all around the world. And Sesame has been started as an idea in 1997, but due to the conflicts in the Middle East region, it faced lots of challenges until this year. So we are expecting its operational in 2016. Sesame is simply international research center. It's located in Jordan, and it was based as a gift or like a donation from Germany. In 1999, the first meeting was held at UNESCO to propose a synchrotron radiation facility in the Middle East. And the members currently are 9. Cyprus, Jordan, Egypt, Israel, Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, and others are sought also to join. And there are also observer countries: France, Germany, Italy, European Union, United Kingdom, United States, and others. The idea for Sesame is actually double-wedged. One of them is to foster the excellence of science in the Middle East, and the other one is to bridge the gaps between the nations of this zone. And as being a part...
The scientific gaps, or... Because when you talk about the group of countries that make up the core, we're obviously using science
exactly
as a way to overcome
all the political...
the political backdrop.
Exactly.
So there's a way of scientist to scientist seeing the other as part of the solution for understanding the science and the results of our research.
Simply, there are no labels inside Sesame. So you can find on one table Arabs, Israeli, Turkish, Iranians. They are all talking with the language of science. And as much as I saw, till now, they succeed. I mean, they put everything aside, and they only talk with science, about science, and how to develop, how to grow, and how to build a community that can hopefully overcome the conflicts and to do something
good for
rewarded.
humanity.
Yeah, good for humanity.
Good
exactly.
for humanity.
Exactly.
Right. I think you know, we also take a page out of UNESCO's history when we talk about the Sesame project,
Exactly.
because UNESCO was also involved in CERN.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly modeled on CERN.
It's modeled on
Exactly.
CERN,
Exactly.
and so we see basically a continuum
Exactly.
of UNESCO science education.
It's another successful example.
When John, when we were talking, if I can get familiar, Professor Dudley,
As scientists, we're
always
always
familiar?
Yes.
is it when you were thinking about what could be the International Year of Light, and you started to reflect on the scientific research that's going on around the world, did it begin to take shape almost immediately, or was it also a period of kind of a discovery as you were going through the process and saying back in 2011, oh my, you know, we need to include this, we need to make sure that these elements, how did that process unfold?
Well, the process actually goes back to 2009. Before, it took 2 years of talking within the science sector itself, within the scientific community, to decide what we wanted to achieve before we even approached UNESCO with a coherent request. And what we had initially focused on were essentially the scientific aspects. It was after we came to UNESCO that we realized that the richness of this year would be greatly increased if we brought in other aspects, such as history, such as culture, such as the interaction with and the support of projects like ALOP and Sesame that were already underway. And so it was a continual back and fro between ourselves as the scientists and UNESCO as the agency to refine the topics that we really wanted to bring forward during the year.
So,
You mean that the project began as a discussion and reaction between scientists?
Most international years begin
Yes.
in a small community of scientists.
And then
But then you realize that you can, if you want the recognition from the United Nations system, you have to show how science is relevant to the world really. And we are not very good at that as scientists. Although we say we are, we're not. We like to be comfortable at our own scientific conferences. And what we don't like to do is have to defend what we do to decision makers, right? We all talk about the need to do it, but we very rarely actually get up and have to argue financially and socially.
But my question was, I mean, my purpose was the following. There is at least two types of projects. There is the project which is conceived by the scientific community, one scientific community, or more than one scientific community, and we ask for the resources afterwards. And that's what happened with you.
Yeah, it's a bottom-up process.
Yes, it's
and
very bottom-up.
the other aspect is the project was decided by the decision maker, and
No.
we will do that for such purpose, for political purpose, or for scientific purpose, or for economic purpose. And I think, excuse me, just a second, and I think that the true project is this kind of project.
The bottom-up project.
Yes,
I
come
couldn't agree
from the
more.
discussion.
Yeah. I mean, I think
come from the community itself.
Yes.
Yes,
And it
I-
has more chance of success than the other one.
Well, I think the reason why the International Year of Light is so attractive to so many different audiences is precisely because the scientists and the communities that we're working with are working with people who are clearly not politicians. We're clearly not in that system. And we relate to them in a way which is impartial and independent. And we don't have any agenda to push. We just want to promote light and science and education. And that's it.
Yeah, and IYL steering committee doesn't tell groups this is what you must do. It comes again from the local groups, their imagination, their creativity.
but then this must also, at some level, help you to articulate, as we're trying to do here
Yeah.
now, in a way that makes this science relevant to the lives of everyday people.
Yeah, I mean, light is life, as the Director General said this morning. Light is involved. Without light, without optics, our modern day technological society is not possible. And to the everyday people, it comes from basic lighting to healthcare, to communications, to manufacturing. I mean, it covers the entire gamut.
I mean, fiber optics.
Oh yeah,
for
I
example,
mean, you wouldn't
has
have your
entered the vernacular.
yeah, exactly. You wouldn't have your internet Ethernet cable without optics.
But even going into a technology that Ibn Al-Haytham would have understood, which is the corrective eyeglass. Now, we're in a table where 80% of the people around the table are wearing eyeglasses, and maybe you're wearing contact lenses.
Right.
I'm not.
Okay.
Okay, well, 80%.
So far,
Okay.
I'm not.
But if you, what I say to people is that if you want to see how optical technology impacts your quality of life, go a day without your glasses. Take them off and try and just function for 24 hours without them.
I can't function for 24 seconds
That's
without
right.
them. That's the problem, and I get a headache.
So issues like this will be discussed in programs and working groups and so on, and Vengu is working on one of these.
So I can call you Vengu then?
Of course, please.
Okay.
Everyone calls me Vengu. So,
Then, if Ibn Al-Haytham was with us today and he was looking at the state of science education, what would be his assessment of where we are?
okay. I think he would not be very happy for a very simple reason. Ibn al-Haytham was an empiricist. He believed in looking at data. He believed in looking at phenomena, discussing it, coming out, synthesizing it, and then coming out with an idea. This is the modern scientific tradition. You predict, you observe, you discuss, you synthesize the knowledge. And Ibn al-Haytham was a master at it. He's the father of modern science, of empiricism and logical thinking, in that long before Bacon and some of the other people whom we ascribe as being modern scientists. The problem is Ibn al-Haytham, and this is quoted in the UNESCO website on Haytham, where he tells people not to just get received wisdom from teachers, question. In other words, Haytham tells people, question authority, learn to think for yourself. And unfortunately, our schools are like factories. Students come in, they take a set of exams, they graduate. They don't understand concepts. They don't understand the basics in it. They might be able to do great problems. They will know what equation to put in, but they don't understand the science behind it. And that's part of the ALAP program that's trying to do. And so that's a big thing, because see, if someone actually does something, they will remember it for the rest of their lives. But if you just listen to me, the professor, standing up, at the blackboard saying, F equals ma, they're not going to remember it for very long.
There's a great quote by an American physicist called Richard Feynman, where he said, "I'd far rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned."
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's a fantastic quote to explain what the scientific spirit is and what we're not teaching today.
No, we are not. I mean, that's basically, I see it with my students. They want easy answers, and that's true all over the world. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it's
Yeah.
Professor
much
Rashid,
correct.
Yes.
there's a little bit of heresy going on here, it sounds like it, but I like what I hear, but I'm not so sure that everybody does. And these are hard times when we think about, the ancient and not so ancient world. And we've got an exhibition that's associated with the conference that draws this thread from the ancients through and into the Golden Age, and of course even beyond now to today. Which essentially tells us something, that what came before makes what comes after possible. And yet what we see at times in parts of our world, that extremists have destroyed the Mosul Museum and the Mosul Library. They burned the libraries of Timbuktu. The ancient world is a source of nothing good. How does Ibn Al-Haytham, if he were here with us, sitting at this table,
He will commit suicide.
he would commit suicide. So I guess he'd be upset.
Yes, that.
But what would he tell us before that?
He tell us two things. He tell us you have to know, as a scientific person, what happened before. You have to criticize it, and through this critique, to find a new question that you try to answer them. There is no other way to make scientific research. And I mean, he applied that in all his works, in astronomy, in physics, in mathematics. It's a very beautiful work in mathematics. He began by criticizing the ancient, criticizing with immense respect. And afterwards, he tried to rethink the question that we have to ask to go further. And that is the way. I don't know any other way to do. Do you know another way to work?
No, I mean, since we're having the open discussion, I mean, I get the feeling that the extremists in Islam, which was Ibn al-Haytham's religion today, they're not interested in going further. They're interested in stopping at a particular point in history, which was maybe even after, which was at a period of Islam which was perhaps even less open than the period that Ibn al-Haytham knew.
I'm not the problem of Islam, he was not concerned with this kind of problems.
No.
I mean, his Islam is very simple. He began in the name of God and the Prophet and so on, and afterwards he was speaking about science.
So
There's absolutely nothing else.
It was what we. That's almost the modern spirit, where we separate into different
Yes.
camps, the religious and the scientific.
It seems to me that there is, with him, it was separated.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the conviction, religious conviction of Ibn al-Haytham. I say, as for instance, in Soviet Union, you have, Marx has said, and afterwards you forget everything about Marx. And then you are working, you are doing science, and that is all. All the books that I studied from Ibn al-Haytham, either in mathematics, in astronomy, in everything, it is always like that. I don't know other way, that is his way to do. And if I can generalize, I can say that this separation was the only way to do science.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect analogy, Marx, and
Yes.
or the chairman's
Yes,
red
our
book.
colleagues at this period, Marx has said, Lenin has said, and afterwards he forgot Marx and Lenin.
Even though you had this big
science.
philosophical thing of dialectical materialism, it was still quantum physics of Landau and others. So.
For instance, or in mathematics, all the school of Leningrad, St. Petersburg, and so on.
Professor Camel, based on the work that's coming, especially within the context of the Sesame project, what do you see on the horizon for the science that we're talking about today? This science of optics and clearly of light. What's the future look like for us?
The future is very bright.
I like that.
Pun intended, right?
Well, even if it was based on the history, but I see a very, very, very bright future, especially if we throw everything aside and think only about the future, about the next generations, about the humanity. I think this way of thinking will lead us somewhere healthy, because recently we are having waves of violence, like extremists are what they are trying to show. They are trying to put a rule, and we want to break a rule. And I think this conference, me participating in it, I think it's the best revenge, and it's one of the good approaches to respond to these extremists.
Another narrative.
Another, yes, and just to tell them, no, we are here, and we refuse what you do, and we are going forward, and we will do something like we'll bring the Islamic golden age probably somehow. Even if it's not the Islamic, at least the humans' golden
A
age.
human golden age.
Yeah.
Well, the human golden age faces quite a bit of challenge,
Yeah.
and there are other challenges out there. Not to say the
No,
least
exactly.
is that we're looking at coming up at the end of this year a major conference on climate.
Yeah.
Just curious in terms of this area of scientific research, does it have applications in helping us better understand what are the challenges that we face in climate change?
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
Of
Who wants to
course.
take that one?
Yeah.
I mean,
Remote sensing
Yeah.
using optics,
Mm-hmm.
definitely to see how forests are dying and how global warming is causing the polar ice caps to melt.
Or
It's all optics.
but even if you think about renewable energy and the use of
Yeah.
solar power, it all involves the science of how light interacts with materials to generate electricity.
Yeah.
Or the replacement of inefficient lighting systems based on incandescence or even fluorescence with low energy LEDs. About 20% of the world's energy budget comes from lighting. So if you use better lighting, then you burn 20% less fossil fuels immediately. So that's only the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
There's lots of areas where light science touches on climate change.
There's something that is obvious to me in as we sit in a very well-lit studio, and not the least of which is that I'm in the company of some very, very, very smart individuals, but also in the company of a couple of guys who are wearing interesting ties that are not exactly the same, but certainly
Yep.
are.
They are the same.
They're I guess
His
maybe
is wider,
Yeah.
his is
that's
wider.
why-
Okay, that's
but
what.
they're the same.
Okay, so what are we looking at on those ties?
This is a special tie created for the International Year of Light. Shows the spectrum. It's a nice design.
Electromagnetic
It doesn't
spectrum.
have any real.
Well, if it did have a real,
Yeah, it's a spectrum from.
it would look very similar to the light that is generated by a synchrotron, for example.
Yeah.
This is exactly the
Yeah.
radiation that we
Yeah,
use in the
you
synchrotron.
generate what's called a continuum of radiation from the blue to the red, but you also generate a lot outside, which is invisible ultraviolet and X-rays and invisible infrared out here.
Exactly.
So what we see is only what our eyes respond to.
Well-
And it's worthwhile just pointing out that the theory of vision that we enjoy was also developed
Yes,
by
you
Ibn
see.
Al-Haytham and others, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about it since I work on eyes and our modern.
about the
Al-Haytham laid the foundations of what is called physiological optics, and he showed how the Greeks were wrong with the emanation hypothesis, that it's really light reflecting off objects that goes into your eye that causes the visual sensation. And the eye, the retina is a direct outgrowth of the neural ectoderm of the brain. So in a sense, studying the eye allows you to study the brain. And Al-Haytham laid the foundations for that. And then he in turn influenced later scientists, from Kepler onwards, and Helmholtz, who was considered the father of physiological optics. So.
Actually, I am working on the history of spherical geometry. The main book in spherical geometry was written by the Greek Menelaus. This book remained without any influence, or very little influence, until the Arabic period. It was translated in Arabic, and afterward there is a huge book, a huge work on spherical geometry. 1 century later, it was translated in Latin. And from Latin, it was the main book in this subject until late 18th century. Science has no frontiers, no political frontiers. or the main science at least, not science, the main science has no political frontiers. And that is very astonishing. In the ancient world, I can give you example from the Greeks, in the medieval period, in the 17th, 18th century period, and very recently now, I mean.
At Sesame.
Huh?
At Sesame.
That's Sesame.
At Sesame as well.
But you have to have the
Yes,
mechanism.
but I believe more in theoretical foundation of science
Yeah,
than
we
in
did
direct
experimentation based on-
application.
Yeah, I know. You're biased to the theory and
Yeah.
biased to the experiment.
Yeah, but for that to happen, right, you have to have a society
Yeah.
that is tolerant
Absolutely.
to exchange of
Absolutely.
people
Yes.
and ideas and information,
Absolutely.
and that has open borders essentially. I mean, if you this idea of people heading to Baghdad to learn scientific wisdom is something which we see today. We see people head to Harvard, they head to Oxford, right, and people from China migrate out from China, do degrees in the US and in the UK and Europe, and then they head back. And that exchange goes on, and it's to the benefit of everyone, both culturally, because we learn to understand each other, and scientifically, because you have a greater workforce at a higher level working on more subjects. And I think that one of the issues with the extremist politics in the Middle East now is this tendency to close borders, to close philosophical borders at the 13th century, and to close geographical borders, to stop people moving out and moving back in. And unless something changes, both in society to remove the philosophical borders and within laws to simplify the geography, nothing will change. And Sesame is a drop in the ocean
Yeah.
compared to the problem that we have to solve. And events like this conference, I think, is a good start, because you end up with 200 people who are in power of making decisions. And they wouldn't come together here if it wasn't for UNESCO. And that's a really important thing to say. Because as scientists, there's no way we could do this at all.
Well,
Right? It's only because of this convening power that the UN has that we're able to have an event like this. And I think it's a shame that UNESCO doesn't make it easier, actually, to organise things like this, because there's this 4-year process to do things. But,
you see, part of the pursuit of science or scientific excellence is at its best when it's part of a way of life for people, for cultures, and that's very important. But also, in a certain sense, we scientists are to blame also, because not all of us are civic-minded. We need these civic scientists, those who can go educate the public as to why what we are doing is important. It isn't enough to say to our funding agencies, to the National Science Foundation or, the EU, say, give us money, we want to do this. We have to say why it is important. And there we scientists have failed.
On that note, again, thanks so much. It's been a great
Please,
conversation and a great
thank you.
discussion. And certainly look forward to more of the International Year of Light and next year and the year after. And
that is the people who are doing it.
Well, the International Year of Light doesn't end on December 31st at 11:59.
no, it doesn't go dark, I guess.
Right. So, we are hoping that, and John can talk about this in greater length, that project started now will continue on. It'll be like, we drop a stone in water and the waves go on out, and we hope the International Year of Light would be like that.
it will. I mean, I think the seeds are now sown, where a lot of individuals have seen the importance and the power in what we can change by engaging with a wider public.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the long-term legacy of the year will be that, just a generation of scientists, young
Yes.
people, taking on the mantle and changing things, communicating better in the future. And that's unstoppable, I think.
But you did a lot of work. And really,
Yes,
that is
but-
nice, yes.
That's a positive note.
That's a positive.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.